that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Glad to be with you. Let's get started by talking about the Strzok testimony, where FBI agent Peter Strzok lied to and laughed at the American people. Now, remember this. Peter Strzok demonstrated tremendous animosity in written communication in the form of text toward Donald Trump and those who support him. Peter Strzok has been walked out of the FBI building and reassigned to other duties. He was kicked off the Mueller investigation. But we also learned last week he still has a security clearance. I have no idea why. Why would he need a security clearance for what he's doing now? And for anyone who's worked with security clearances, there's a clear, you get those for need. It's a need to know thing. If you need to know something that is sensitive, you get a classified, you get a security clearance. If you don't, then you're not supposed to have one. I have no idea why Peter Strzok would still have one. Now, neither the Democrats nor the Republicans overall acquitted themselves well interviewing Mr. Strzok, but I have some things that when I looked at it, what I took away from it as kind of a overall position. The Democrats were doing their best to disrupt the proceedings and change the subject, even going so far as to moving for adjournment, that was dismissed. But Steve Cohen, Democrat from Tennessee, had a very odd statement, and that's one way to put it, with regard to Mr. Strzok.
Be nice. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Strzok, I don't know where to start. If I could give you a Purple Heart, I would. You deserve one. This has been an attack on you in a way to attack Mr. Mueller and the investigation that is to get at Russia collusion involved in our election, which is what this committee should be looking at. A direct strike at democracy and what this country's about, and free and fair elections, keeping us independent of who is our foe, not our competitor, our foe. I just returned from the OSCE in Berlin, and there is little question among our allies and people and diplomats throughout Europe that Russia is an antagonistic country that is trying to wreak havoc in the Baltics, in the Balkans as well. They tried to use assassination to try to influence the elections in Montenegro, what they've done in Ukraine with Crimea and the Donbass, what they've done in Georgia, what they've done in Moldova. They are the bad guys. And you've dedicated most of your life to working in counterintelligence. One of your big cases, I think, was Donald Heathfield and Tracy Ann Foley. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was how many Russian folks did you expose and bring to justice?
That was a
Fascinating. Let me ask this question. Was Russia our foe back in 2012 when Barack Obama said he was going to have more flexibility after his next election, which was his last one? And he said that to the president of Russia, Medvedev, who told him, I will communicate that to Vladimir. Were they our foes then, or was it just a matter of being a foe now that Donald Trump is president? But the Purple Heart comment, that was really over the top. Also, the idea of Democrats and fair elections being a little bit over the top, if you know anything about what goes on in American elections where Democrats are involved. This is lunacy, but that seems to be where the Democrats were with respect to Peter Strzok. It's not about Strzok. He's a great guy, despite the fact that he's on company time, on a company device, trashing an American citizen who turns out to be the president of the United States. I don't get that. On the other side, the GOP did not fare much better. There was some descent into some pettiness, but John Ratcliffe of Texas inartfully articulated what I think is the sentiment of a lot of American people, maybe the majority, when it comes to Peter Strzok as an FBI agent and maybe even as a human being.
I thank my colleague for yielding. Agent Strzok, on May the 9th, 2017, President Trump fired FBI Director Jim Comey. That same day, you and FBI lawyer Lisa Page exchanged quite a few texts on the topic. At 8:14 p.m. on that day, you texted Ms. Page and said, quote, "And we need to open the case we've been waiting on now while Andy is acting," end quote. First, is that Andy McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, who has since been fired and criminally referred by the Inspector General?
It is.
All right. And what case are you referring to opening now that Andy is the acting director of the FBI?
Sir, to get into that would relate to ongoing investigations, which, consistent with the department's policy on ongoing investigations and based on special counsel equities, I'm not authorized to discuss ongoing investigations.
Okay. Well, let me see if I can give you a question that you can't answer. You sent 4 more texts to Ms. Page, and her first response to you at the bottom of that page you're looking at is, quote, "We need to lock in," and then there's a black mark where someone's name's been redacted. "We need to lock in redacted in a formal, chargeable way, period. Soon, period." Whose name's been blacked out?
Sir, I don't know. I need to see the original list or original text.
You don't know? Okay. Well, I don't know either. Here's what else I don't know. I don't know if the person whose name has been redacted is Republican or Democrat. I don't know if they're black or brown or white.
I don't either, sir.
I don't know their religious beliefs. I don't know their sexual orientation. I don't know those things, and I don't care. But here's what I do know. I do know that decisions about when and whether to open investigations and when and whether to charge people with crimes aren't supposed to depend on who's sitting in the director's chair or on political decisions or on the political agendas of FBI agents and lawyers. So if a Trump-hating FBI agent and a Trump-hating FBI lawyer who have talked about effing Trump, stopping Trump, impeaching Trump, are within hours of President Trump firing their boss, if they start talking about opening an investigation now that Andy is acting and that some person needs to be locked in a formal, chargeable way soon, I know, as a former U.S. attorney, that if, in fact, that's what happened, I know that whoever is the subject of that case that was opened now that Andy is acting, and whoever you and Ms. Page talked about needing to be locked in soon in a formal, chargeable way, well, they would have had their civil liberties violated. They would have been deprived of due process. So my first question to you, you wouldn't answer. My second question to you, you couldn't answer. Let's go for a third question. On page 400 of the Inspector General report, someone tells the Inspector General, quote, "There is a bright line, a bright and inviolable line between what you think personally and belief and the conduct of your official business." Who said that?
I believe I did, sir.
You did say that. And I heard you say similar things last week. I heard you say similar things today. You said it very clearly. You said it very unequivocally in your opening remarks that you never crossed that inviolable line in 26 years. Earlier today, in response to a question, you said, "I took my personal belief out of every official action." So you're asking us to believe that when you say things like F Trump and stop Trump and impeach Trump, that those are just personal beliefs, and that when you say those things, you never cross that line, that bright, inviolable line, and allow it to impact your official conduct. That's really what this comes down to, that you're asking us to believe, isn't it?
Sir, I'm asking you to believe, and I'm offering you evidence.
Yeah, well, you
whether
have.
It's the IG report, whether it's anything that's been found, that there's been no active bias found anywhere.
You have, under oath, been as clear as a bell on that. You've said it over and over again. And because of that, I'm almost embarrassed to ask you this question. Of the approximately 50,000 text messages that I've seen with your personal beliefs like F Trump, stop Trump, impeach Trump, go ahead and confirm on the record that none of that occurred on an official FBI device or on official FBI time. Go ahead and do that.
Sir, no, they did. Many of them did.
Oh, they did. Okay, so
50,000, sir.
So really, no, I'll give you a chance at the end. So what you really meant to say was that when you said you never crossed that bright, inviolable line, what you meant to say was, except for 50,000 times, except for hundreds of times a day where I went back and forth expressing my personal opinions about effing Trump and stopping Trump and impeaching Trump on official FBI phones on official FBI time. Other than that, you never crossed that line. I'm sure there are 13,000 FBI agents out there that are beaming with pride at how clearly you've drawn that line. Agent Strzok, are you starting to understand why some folks out there don't believe a word you say, and why it's especially troubling that you, of all people, are at the center of the 3 highest profile investigations in recent times that involve President Trump, and that you were in charge of an investigation investigating, gathering evidence against Donald Trump, a subject that you hated, that you wanted to F him, to stop him, to impeach him? And do you see why that might call into question everything you've touched on all of those investigations? Chairman, I'm done with this witness, and I yield back.
Let's not forget that Peter Strzok lied to the American people, lied to his wife. Let's not forget that he said he had no bias, but he spent 50,000 text messages. And when Mueller got wind of what he had done and how he had conducted himself, he threw him off the investigation team. This guy's he's a joke, but he still has a security clearance and is still drawing an FBI paycheck. In other news, time to distract from this, as well as the overseas meeting that Donald Trump is going to have with Vladimir Putin, our good friend Robert Mueller issued some more indictments of Russians, people who will never see the inside of a courtroom. Now, Trey Gowdy is out there saying that President Trump should tell Vladimir Putin that he should extradite these 12 Russians who have now been indicted. Get out of here with that foolishness. But Fox News brought on a former State Department advisor who actually broke some things down about the Russian indictment, or the indictment of Russians, that hadn't been spoken of very much anywhere else.
Robert Mueller indicting 12 Russian intel officers for hacking the DCC, the DNC, and the Hillary Clinton campaign during the 2016 presidential election. The indictment is coming shortly after President Trump vowed to confront Russian President Vladimir Putin over the country's meddling during Monday's meeting. However, the president warns there will not be a, quote, Perry Mason moment. Take a listen.
Will we be talking about meddling? And I will absolutely bring that up. I don't think you'll have any, gee, I did it, you got me. There won't be a Perry Mason here, I don't think, but you never know what happens, right? But I will absolutely, firmly ask the question. And hopefully we'll have a very good relationship with Russia.
For to weigh in on all of this, former State Department senior advisor Christian Whiten. Christian, what's your reaction to this news in the indictments?
Right. There's not a whole lot new here. This is extremely similar to indictment that Mueller handed down in February. The difference here is that these were identified as operatives of the GRU, Russia's military intelligence, but same spear phishing, general type spoofing attacks on the Democrats' information systems, which of course makes a lot of sense if you're Russian intelligence. After all, Hillary put a bunch of classified emails on a homebrew server. We still don't know what happened to those. The timing, I have to say, is suspicious. Mueller, releasing this the one working day before the president has his first summit with Putin, that's a little bit peculiar.
Why is it that they were just going after, as far as we know, and according to this indictment, the Dems?
The indictment says very little about motive for that, specifically why it was the Democrats. But as I mentioned earlier, frankly, the fact that Hillary was extraordinarily sloppy, Congress and the American people still don't know what was on Hillary's server. Maybe Trump can ask Putin about that, and he could tell us because he seems to probably have a better chance, or we could ask the Chinese. Also, everyone assumed that Hillary Clinton, at least all the experts in Washington and the people I assume who are advising the Russians, told them that Hillary Clinton was going to win, so they were probably trying to wean information on what the government would look like. But, of course, it had no impact on the election at all.
You say it had no impact at all. Walk me through that analysis.
because, first of all, there was no change, no effect, no impact on actual balloting systems where you could change a vote theoretically. It didn't happen. And if you look at the amounts, at least in the prior indictment and in other leaks out of Mueller's political operation that show, there are tens of thousands here, perhaps up to 1 million, that's not enough money to influence the outcome of the mayor's race in Topeka, much less a presidential race where billions of dollars ultimately get spent. It's just, as far as political warfare goes, it's a drop in the bucket.
Well, that's the thinking, though, by Hillary Clinton and her friends and family, I suppose, that somehow the Russians stole this election from her. And so I'm sure they're looking at this news headline today and saying, see, we knew it. At least these guys are getting indicted. Hillary Clinton would be the president of the United States had the Russians just not meddled. I disagree with that theory only because, I think it comes down to whether or not you resonated as a candidate in very important states, many of which she didn't resonate in at all. But, Christian, is this going to give sort of more ammunition, in your view, to the left and their theory that somehow the Russians took this away from her, unfairly so?
You're having some hysteria today. For example, senior Democrats on the House Foreign Affairs Committee saying we ought to cut Russia off from the banking system because of this new revelation. Incidentally, if you want to see the price of oil go up substantially, pay more at the pump in return for very little in foreign affairs. That would just go ahead and do that. There'll be this news bump, but there are serious things that we have to discuss with Russia. Potential cooperation with North Korea if they give up their nuclear weapons. Russia doesn't like China, despite some claims to the contrary. We could cooperate there. We want to push Iran out of Syria. Russia theoretically could help if they're inclined to there. So there's real.
We also have to make sure they don't do this again, right? There's nothing wrong with this president saying, "Yeah, guys, don't try it again. Don't mess with us," because that's going to be kind of ugly if you do. We don't. Number one, Christian, and you know more about this than I do, but at least going back to my days of international relations studies at Columbia University, one of the things that you kind of have to assume is that everybody's spying on everybody, and we have done this historically for years. And if you are a major superpower such as us, I should hope we're spying on them. And you have to kind of assume, yeah, they're probably spying on us too. Not that we should take this lightly, but there's a certain grain of reality here that perhaps people are forgetting about.
That's right. I think Trump has to raise it and will raise it. He says he has, just the way that Angela Merkel had to raise it when, after the Snowden revelations implied that we were listening to her phone conversations. Putin is going to push back. This isn't just a one-way street. We engage in what Russia considers political warfare and political influence. We fund Radio Free Europe. We fund this sort of archipelago of human rights groups that push on Russia's politics. And I'm not saying we should, and I'm not saying there's moral equivalence between us and Russia. But this is going on. And frankly, if you want to look at the adversary that's much better at political influence and that put real money into a presidential election, look at China, which spent lots of money getting President Clinton reelected in 1996.
Mm-hmm. Let's recap that for a bit. The people who were indicted this time were Russian military intelligence officers. And they were probably simply doing their job of figuring out what they should expect from the next presidential administration versus trying to affect the election. Why? Because they didn't put enough money into it to do a thing. And no evidence has come forward that Russian meddling, so-called, changed a single vote, affected a single voting machine. If they meddled, then they're extremely incompetent. If what is more likely, because they heard the same odds that everybody else said, it was a given that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And it's also known that Hillary Clinton played fast and loose with classified information and any other information. She had a homemade server for email. She was about as porous as they could be on information, and she was about to be the president of the United States. Why wouldn't Russia take every advantage to find out what's going on? Not because they didn't want her to be president, but because they already assumed that she would be, as did everybody else. That's the problem here. Peter Strzok went to Congress, lied to the American people, laughed at the American people, while Bob Mueller put out an indictment throwing dust in the air to distract from the fact that someone he had to fire from his investigation was a strange character and extremely dishonest and disingenuous. That's what happened last week with respect to the investigation. The Mueller investigation is meaningless. It is basically now something that the Democrats can't afford to let go of because It is the only thing that gives them the veneer of being a credible political party. If you take that away, they have no clout in D.C. whatsoever, which of course is not a bad thing. But this is going to continue, trust me. And we'll see how long the American people really want to put up with this. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, recently, the Democrat Party went on an Abolish ICE campaign, ICE being the Department of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And this seems to have been spurred on by the recent primary upset victory of Alexandria Ocasio-Castro, whatever her name is, the young lady in New York who upset Joe Crowley. And she describes herself as a democratic socialist who wants to abolish the Department of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now, by the 30th of June, CBS had picked up the story, and they reported on it in this manner.
Well, another part of the anti-immigration marches is to abolish ICE. It's a growing call from Democrats to get rid of the agency that arrests and removes illegal immigrants in the U.S. Paula Reed has that part of the story.
Early this morning, before the demonstrations got underway, President Trump tweeted his support for immigration and customs enforcement, writing, "To the great and brave men and women of ICE, do not worry or lose your spirits." He was responding to top Democrats who are calling to abolish ICE. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a 28-year-old Democrat who just ousted incumbent Congressman Joe Crowley, is among those calling for an end to the agency.
You also support defunding ICE.
Yes.
Can you explain why defund and not reform?
What we really need to do is really reassess our entire approach to immigration in the United States.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand agrees.
Start over, reimagine it, and build something that actually works.
As did New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, who tweeted, "ICE is broken. It's divisive and should be abolished." President Trump told Fox News he wants Democrats to continue attacking ICE because he believes it will cost them at the polls. In an interview, he said, "Well, I hope they keep thinking about it because they're going to get beaten so badly." President Trump is seizing on immigration to rally Republican voters ahead of those critical November midterms. Today, he tweeted that he didn't think that a Republican immigration reform bill could get enough votes to pass through Congress, and tweeted, quote, "We need more Republicans to win in November."
You got to think about what he's saying, what they're saying there. You have people out there saying we need to get rid of ICE. You have people, and of course, this is all part of the family separation fallacy that was being put forward by Democrats when the only thing that's really going on is if you have a problem that's going to take more than 20 days to solve, we're not going to put the kid in jail with you. Nevertheless, we have this. A few days before that CBS report, Fox News went out and met with some protesters and actually got what they had to say in their own words. And this was, to me, a little bit fascinating.
We've been talking about Occupy ICE in Portland. Well, now it's expanding to different cities across the United States, including right here in New York City.
And that's where we send Fox and Friends correspondent Todd Pyro to see what the protesters had to say. Todd.
Good morning, guys. Their anti-rule of law message spreading throughout the country. These self-described anarchists fighting for a nation of no borders and doing everything in their power to keep ICE from doing their jobs.
Why are you here?
I'm here because I think that separating parents from their children and deporting people who are just living their lives is wrong.
A pretty draconian immigration policy that, for Fox viewers, has been around for a very long time. We can start with Clinton if you want to, and Obama.
I think it's important for people to know that ICE does very evil things.
I think it's safe to say, based upon your answers and some of the signs, you want open borders, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
What would be your policy?
No borders, no nations.
What about the actual criminals? Those that you yourself would consider actual serious criminals. Would you want them to come over?
In America, that if you spend enough time in prison, you're absolved of your crime. They should be able to do what they want. And if they commit another crime, they should go to prison again.
What is the goal of your protest here?
The goal of the protest, I think, we have shut down the building for the day. So we have succeeded in doing something material.
I've read this from people who are very, very pro your side in all of this, saying by you being here today, you delayed the process by about 6 weeks from some individuals getting through the detention process. How do you respond to that?
I have heard that as well. And that is something that I am struggling with because I don't want to harm any individual person.
Can I answer that question?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Hi. Sorry, I've heard this question asked quite a few times. There's a public entrance right on Barrack Street that is not being blocked at all.
So why do you think today they canceled all the court hearings because of your protest?
A little bit of a tactic. Are you with Fox News?
Yes, we are.
I don't know if yeah, you're right.
Did you not want to continue talking to me because I'm from Fox News?
What I'm saying is, I think it's fair to say you would enter into a question with a little bit of bias. I actually just wanted to interject on the fact that we're not blocking the public entrance. And so I wanted...
Nobody said that.
Well, I think it was...
I didn't say that.
Well, I think it was a little implied when you phrased the question of saying, by your protest, you might be delaying the process.
No, I said I read a report that was the case. Does anybody else want to talk to me about the issues? Would you...
Hi. I want you to leave. Goodbye.
The Executive Office for Immigration Review told Fox, quote, the Barrack Street Immigration Court did not hold hearings today because detained respondents were not available to appear. Judges will reset hearings that were scheduled to the earliest available date on their dockets.
Also, Todd, yesterday we did a story about how the ICE location in Portland was inundated with members of Antifa, and apparently the feds have now said unless they stop blocking the entrance, everybody's going to get arrested.
So the people who are on the street asking for this movement to abolish ICE to continue don't want the United States to have a border at all. No nations, no borders, no nations. And everybody can come here to commit their crimes, and they spend time in jail, and then they somehow receive absolution, and so they can go out and commit those crimes again. This is what we're talking about. And the interesting thing is the Democrats really are drinking their own bathwater. They started this foolish movement, and 3 House members introduced a bill this past Thursday, which would have been the 12th, to do just that, to abolish immigration and customs enforcement. And those Democrats, they're all Democrats, Representatives Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, Pramila Jayapal of Washington, and Adriano Espaillat, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, of New York. These 3 progressive Democrats introduced a bill to get rid of ICE. This is crazy. Well, you know what? I'm not the only one who thinks it's crazy. Someone with whom I don't agree often and happens to be Speaker of the House had this to say about the bill that was introduced.
They have really jumped the sharks on the left. They have really. It's an amazing. I think it's Pocan's bill from Madison. You want to abolish the Immigration and Customs and Enforcement Agency. This is the agency that gets gangs out of our communities, that helps prevent drugs from flowing into our schools, that rescues people from human trafficking. They want to get rid of this agency. It's the craziest position I've ever seen, and they're tripping over themselves to move too far to the left. They're out of the mainstream of America, and that's one of the reasons why I feel very good about this fall.
And among the reasons I feel very good about this fall is that no matter what, Paul Ryan will not be back in Congress. But his point was that the party should do well. There was a published report that said that 25% of voters favored abolishing ICE, which means that 75% of voters, at least the ones that participated in the survey, had a totally different solution in mind. Why would you introduce a bill that the best you can come up with from polling, and polling tends to be very favorable toward Democrat positions and even progressive Democrat positions, the best you can get is 25%? You want to introduce that legislation? And in a rare move of political cunning and just shrewdness, the GOP said, okay, bring it. Please go ahead and bring it. And when they basically called the bluff of the Democrat Party, you really want to abolish ICE? Yeah, let's go ahead and vote on that. Newsy gave this report on Friday the 13th, which might be appropriate for that legislation.
The House of Representatives will vote on a Democratic bill to abolish ICE, the House Majority Leader confirmed Thursday. But even the Democrats who introduced the bill aren't happy about it. The lawmakers who put the bill forward say they plan to vote no, calling Republicans' move a political stunt. They say Republicans know the bill can't be passed and are pushing forward with it anyway for political gain. Dismantling ICE has become a rallying cry for far-left Democrats in recent weeks after Democratic Socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won her congressional primary in New York. In a shocking upset, she beat out high-ranking Democrat Representative Joe Crowley. Abolishing ICE was a cornerstone of her campaign. More moderate Democrats are worried the call to disband the immigration agency could cost the party swing seats in the House and Senate during this year's midterm elections. High-ranking Republicans reportedly pushed for the vote Thursday, hoping to get Democrats on record as either backing a measure which could harm them in the midterms or voting no and highlighting the rift within the Democratic Party.
This is the part that I just find astonishing. You get on this so-called grassroots wave that you believe is there because a Democratic socialist won in New York City, won a primary in New York City, and you have Antifa and other very far left individuals jumping up and down in the street calling for ICE to be abolished. So you decide to introduce legislation in Congress to accomplish this goal. And then when the Republicans say, oh, really? Sure, let's schedule a vote on that. You come out and say that you will vote against the very bill that you introduced in response to your grassroots movement. Scheduling a vote on it a political stunt. Well, why did you introduce the legislation if you didn't want to vote? You could debate anything you want. You can get on C-SPAN at 2 o'clock in the morning like anybody else and run your mouth about anything you wish. Why did you introduce legislation if you did not want a vote? The whole point here is the Democrat Party is crazy. This is not a position the American people favor. No matter how they feel about family separations at the border, nobody's saying you need to get rid of those who enforce immigration law, unless you don't believe that the United States should have a border at all. Those are the people who are on board with this craziness. This is the type of thing, as Donald Trump said, and I think he's accurate on this, they're going to get destroyed if this is the message they try to carry forward into November. They need to put this as far behind them as that better deal nonsense that they talked about, was it last summer? I think it was last summer, where they're going to come up with a better deal as some answer to an economic platform that they lost on. They wanted to come up with a counter. They talked about that for part of June, got into July. That went over like a lead balloon, and they buried that thing deeper than the Titanic at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. You haven't heard about that since. They need to find a way to deep six this foolishness as well. The problem is you've activated the crazies now. And the immigration issue is coming fairly close to a third rail concern in American politics. So when Paul Ryan said, you know what, I think they've jumped the shark on this, they might be close to right. What are you guys trying to accomplish with this foolishness? Because you have no hope of winning your own, the polling that's out there, 25%? And I guarantee you it's only heaviest in places where the Democrat is already safely ensconced in a seat, like the one that the Democratic Socialist in New York won. She basically won. This is how safe it is Democratic. She won the Democrat primary, so you already know she's going to be in Congress. That's how safe the seat is. If the seat is not that safe, this position is going to get somebody destroyed. The Democrats are doing everything they can right now to expose how far left they are, to alienate the electorate, and to buck against the normal trend in midterm elections in the first term of a presidency where the opposition party tends to gain seats. If they keep stuff up like this, they're not going to gain seats. They're going to have a smaller minority in both the House and Senate. But I'm just a commentator on the radio. Thank goodness I'm no more than that, because I'd hate to be a Democrat in Congress who's pushing this type of foolishness on the American people, thinking that this is going to fly. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of this first hour. I want to talk a little bit about Andrew Cuomo and his strange statement on Roe v. Wade with respect to what he would do if it were overturned. Before I get to that, let's do a little bit of recap. We are now looking at Donald Trump making his second appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. He filled the vacancy that was created with the death of Antonin Scalia, that Obama was not allowed to fill because the GOP-controlled Senate said, we're not going to hear from you anymore with respect to Supreme Court nominations. Rightly or wrongly, that was their decision. I tend to agree with it personally, but others obviously will not. And now Anthony Kennedy has announced his retirement. He will not be there when the court begins its new session in the fall. So we need a replacement. Kavanaugh is there, looking to be Kennedy's replacement, and not surprisingly, because he is Trump's nominee and because he is not a flaming leftist, the progressives and the Democrats have come out in full force against him. Chuck Schumer said he's going to oppose him with everything that I've got, and people are saying that if he is confirmed that he's going to gut Obamacare, let me help you out. Newsflash. Obamacare has already been gutted like a fish, and it's just basically baking in the sun right now. It's done. But also that he would overturn Roe v. Wade. And I find that interesting to say that because there's nothing in Judge Kavanaugh's record to indicate that he would. On the 11th of July, Wall Street Journal published a report trying to kind of put their spin on what do they think it means for Brett Kavanaugh to be nominated to the Supreme Court.
With President Trump's selection of Brett Kavanaugh to sit on the Supreme Court, one of the big questions that a lot of people are asking is, what does this mean for Roe v. Wade? That's the big 1973 case that established the right to an abortion. And will it possibly be overturned? And this comes down to probably two big questions. One is how people feel about the case itself and whether it was rightly decided. And the other is how they feel about precedents and the idea of overturning a long-time court precedent. Now, Democrats almost uniformly believe that Roe v. Wade was rightly decided. Now, Republicans often believe it was wrongly decided, but they're kind of split on this question of whether or not precedents should be overturned. And you could picture a situation in which a lot of this comes down to Chief Justice John Roberts. There's little doubt, I think, that he believes that Roe is a bad case. Most conservatives feel that way, but he has more mixed feelings about precedent, and he's sometimes shown an unwillingness to overturn a long-time court precedent. So the truth is, I think, nobody really knows what the court is going to do on Roe v. Wade. It may come down to the Chief Justice. We also don't know exactly how Judge Kavanaugh feels about Roe, since he doesn't have a lot of cases relating to that. But one thing that we do know is that both sides are making predictions regardless of what they actually know. Democrats are saying Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned, and they're warning their voters of that. It's a way to energize their voters.
What is at stake is women's freedom.
Republicans, who have been calling for the overturning of Roe for years, decades really, are now saying, don't worry, the case won't be overturned, nothing to see here, folks. And that's because they are wary of energizing Democratic voters, both in terms of the confirmation process and also in terms of the midterms.
I don't think it's going to be overturned. You don't, no matter who the president appoints.
It's not to say that each side doesn't believe what it's saying, just that it also serves a political purpose. Now, the one thing that I think we do know is that this court will be a lot more receptive to, if not overturning Roe, chipping away at it. That is, when states come up with ways to restrict abortion that are short of completely banning it, a court that has Judge Kavanaugh on it, as opposed to a court that has Justice Kennedy, is likely to be much more receptive.
And for those who have been paying attention, states have been going at abortion to roll back access, to roll back the ability to seek abortions and to murder the unborn in the womb. They've been doing that for quite a while now. So certain states are actually fashioning their laws specifically to get at the Supreme Court, to get something in front of them and push them to make a ruling. And public sentiment is not in favor of killing children in the womb. It's just not. At one time it was. But when you get to the point where women are actually out there trying to define this as, you know what, my quote-unquote right to summarily murder a child in the womb, if I can't do that, that's an attack on women's lives and freedom? Seriously? That's the type of rhetoric that gets you out of sync with the American people and gets your position thrown away. But that's where they want to go. Also on the 11th of July, Glenn Beck of The Blaze gave a little bit more information specifically on Brett Kavanaugh and what he thought he might do with respect to Roe v. Wade.
It is remarkable that Democrats now are building their entire opposition to Kavanaugh on abortion. Why? Well, think about it. With all of the potential issues that could come before the Supreme Court, the court takes only 80 cases per year. Your number one issue is how Kavanaugh might theoretically vote if the court took a case challenging Roe versus Wade. I don't think he's going to. He's far too careful. He doesn't like making big decisions. The Women's March called Kavanaugh's nomination a death sentence for thousands of women in the United States. Really? The Women's March is already promoting a wire hanger publicity stunt. They want you to hand-deliver your message opposing Kavanaugh to your senator with a message attached to a wire hanger. Imagine, just for a second, imagine what we could accomplish as a people if we didn't have politics ruining and running our lives. The panic over Roe versus Wade is slightly overblown. During Kavanaugh's 2006 Senate campaign, confirmation for the U.S. Court of Appeals in D.C. Circuit, Senator Schumer asked him, do you consider Roe versus Wade to be an abomination? Here's his reply.
Senator, on the question of Roe v. Wade, if confirmed to the D.C. Circuit, I would follow Roe v. Wade faithfully and fully. That would be binding precedent in the court. It's been decided by the Supreme Court.
Ask you your own opinion.
And I'm saying if I were confirmed to the D.C. Circuit, Senator, I would follow it. It's been reaffirmed many times, including in Planned Parenthood.
I understand, but what is your opinion? You're not on the bench yet. You've talked about these issues in the past to other people, I'm sure.
The Supreme Court has held repeatedly, Senator, and I don't think it would be appropriate for me to give a personal view on that case.
Isn't that what you want out of a judge? I don't care what your personal opinion is. Now, it's not going to make the real diehard conservative base happy, but if he responds similarly this time, it will be likely enough to get him confirmed.
And confirmation, of course, is the issue. You'll notice the guy just says, I'm going to follow it faithfully. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he wouldn't overturn it, because following it faithfully does not necessarily mean that the decision is what people think it is in the mind of Brett Kavanaugh. That could be on the right or on the left. There are many people who looked at that decision and says it doesn't give a right to abortion. It specifically does not. And if you interpret it narrowly, you do not have a right to an abortion. But that's for people who are much more versed in the legal profession to argue. I'm not looking to argue that. Nevertheless, despite this, so you have Kavanaugh being a tennis ball being bandied about between the left and the right, even though he has not said anything to indicate that he's looking to overturn Roe v. Wade. Nevertheless, that lunatic in New York, Andrew Cuomo, who is running for governor against someone who's even further to the left than he is, which is Cynthia Nixon, he has made some interesting threats with respect to Roe v. Wade as part of his campaign for a third term as New York's governor.
Cuomo says before legal action can begin, the state first needs to approve a measure to codify the landmark 1973 decision into state law. It was the governor's third day of campaign-style rallies to promote the bill, known as the Reproductive Health Act.
I want to get it done before the Supreme Court does that, because I don't want any gap in a woman's right to protection, and we have a better legal case when the Supreme Court acts, because I will sue when the Supreme Court acts.
It was not immediately clear what the legal basis for a lawsuit would be. A spokesman, Rich As a Party, says only that the administration will seek to protect the fundamental constitutional right of women under both state and federal law. So far, Republicans who control the state Senate have not agreed to return to the Capitol to pass the Reproductive Health Act and a related bill expanding contraceptive coverage. They say they dislike some provisions of the measure. The right to choose abortion has become a key focus of the Democratic primary for governor. Cuomo's Democratic primary challenger, Cynthia Nixon, held her own rally to protest Trump's selection of Kavanaugh to serve on the Supreme Court. Nixon says her own mother had an illegal abortion in New York before the 1970 state law decriminalized the procedure. She says it was a tremendously awful experience for her mom. Nixon, speaking at a rally in New York City, pulled a metal hanger from her tote bag, saying it's a gruesome reminder of what went on before Roe.
This is something that women in this state and in this country were driven to use out of fear and desperation, performing abortions on themselves, often with devastating effects to their health and sometimes to their life. We must never, ever, ever go back to a time when any woman feels that she has to make this kind of a choice.
Since Trump announced his choice for the court, both Nixon and Cuomo have received endorsements from pro-choice groups. The political wing of the state's Planned Parenthood has endorsed Cuomo for a third term, saying he's been a national leader in the fight for reproductive health rights and that it's important to have experienced politicians in charge during a time when they say Roe v. Wade hangs in the balance. Nixon, meanwhile, was endorsed by the national group Vote Pro-Choice. It's affiliated with the Women's March on Washington and has endorsed pro-abortion rights candidates across the country. Vote Pro-Choice co-founder Heidi Sick says Cuomo has not done enough to get abortion rights protections approved in New York. She says the governor had every opportunity and the power to fully protect a woman's right to access safe legal abortion, but instead helped keep Republicans in control of the state Senate, where the bills have stalled for several years. Nixon has accused Cuomo of tacitly supporting a group of breakaway Democrats who helped the Republicans maintain control of the Senate. Cuomo denies that. Earlier this year, after the state budget passed, he convinced the breakaway faction to rejoin the rest of the Democrats. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
So it is part of the campaign for the Democrat nomination for governor in New York, which probably means whoever wins the nomination is going to be governor. And Andrew Cuomo is appealing to the stupid. Simple as that. He doesn't control the Senate. The Republican Party controls the Senate. They're not necessarily interested in passing the bill that he wants. He knows that. And nothing he says that stirs up even more pro-abortion rhetoric is going to necessarily sway the Republicans in the New York Senate. It's not going to happen. The other thing is, you're going to sue the Supreme Court? Let me help you out with something. If you could sue the Supreme Court for overturning Wade, please explain to me why some governor hasn't already sued the Supreme Court for the ruling in the first place back in 1973. There is no legal basis for a lawsuit because you don't like the Supreme Court's decision. The whole idea of them being the Supreme Court is you have no appeal from there. Not from a judicial standpoint. If you want to deal with something that you don't like the Supreme Court did, you got to go back to the legislative branch and have them pass a law that the Supreme Court would interpret in the manner that you prefer. That's your option. But the whole idea of overturning Wade, for people who don't get it, overturning Roe v. Wade would not make abortion illegal in the United States. It would basically put it back in the hands of the states for them to regulate it as the citizens of that state through their duly elected representatives see fit. Some states will continue to allow abortion. Some other states would probably not allow abortion. And there would be even other states that would be somewhere in the middle. You can do this under certain circumstances, and others we would not. But the idea of a republic response to this, as opposed to a federal one-size-fits-all, is what really scares to pieces the Democrat Party. They do not want the people to make this decision on their own. They want to make it for them. And that is what overturning Roe v. Wade, that's why it scares them. That's their fear factor. Because they know they don't have the support of the entire country. They know that. And they know that in certain states they don't have adequate support at all. So they're going to fight for Roe v. Wade. But Andrew Cuomo sounds like a lunatic. And the thing is, he knows. And the people who are listening to him, and the other folks who are listening to Cynthia Nixon is saying that her mother's abortion in 1970 was difficult for her. How come it wasn't difficult for you? Because how do you know what got you a pass? Why you weren't aborted and your potential sibling was? Really? You got to think about this stuff. Because obviously progressives don't. If I had known that my mother had had an abortion, man, it would make me feel real dicey about my own existence. Why was I special and my brother or sister was not? What made that decision? I need to know. But when you're a progressive, you don't care about stuff like that. Roe v. Wade is going to go down, if it goes down, simply because the American people no longer favor it. That's where we're going in this country. And the Supreme Court is not here to oppose the will of the American people. It's just that simple. And with that, I will turn it over to my good friend, Ron Edwards, and after that, we'll be back with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
This is Diamond and Silk, and we never miss a page from the Edwards Notebook.
Beijing accused the United States of opening fire on the world. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, for decades, the United States has literally been abused and taken advantage of. When it comes to trade, many nations have all slapped massive tariffs ranging from 10 to 25% against various U.S. products, while enjoying very low tariffs averaging 2.5% when sending their goods to America. Let's not forget that China has been allowed to run the okey-doke on America and steal the intellectual property of innovative U.S. companies and use that to compete against our corporations. So along came President Trump, who sought to level the playing field and proposed that all nations drop tariffs and openly and fairly compete in a true free market environment. China and other nations are responding with more tariffs and complaints because they would rather screw over the United States than compete fairly and prosper in a free trade situation. President Trump, I thank you for seeing the big picture and standing up for America while fighting for true free trade that would benefit all nations. And don't miss the Ron Edwards Experience, Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericaMatters.us, SHR Media, and Sunday midnights on Talk America Radio. I'm Ron Edwards.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, this is a hard thing to imagine if you lived through the Obama administration, where we had reports that said as many as 100 million people were no longer participating in the workforce, either being unemployed or simply not working and not drawing unemployment and just not even looking for work. All of a sudden, with Trump, we have a totally different environment. Back in June, CBS Detroit affiliate, Channel 62, filed this report.
More jobs were created in May than the nation's top economists were forecasting. More people working and wages better than before. The kind of jobs report people, including presidents, love to see.
These are exciting times for America.
President Trump says faith in the American economy keeps getting stronger now that the nation's employers added 223,000 new jobs last month alone, signaling growth that is especially strong in retail, healthcare, and construction. Wages climbed, and the unemployment rate, it fell to 3.8%.
We have reached yet one more historic milestone, with 3.8% unemployment just announced and another all-time record low African American unemployment, Hispanic unemployment at an all-time low in history. We're very honored by that.
There is strength in the economy, and though the labor market is tight, there is still growth happening.
CBS Money Watch correspondent Diane King Hall says new jobs putting more money in Americans' pockets has them spending more, and investors like that.
Strong reports, so that certainly helps to fuel the optimism in the market.
18 years ago, April of 2000 was the last time the unemployment rate was down to 3.8. Unemployment shot up to an alarming 10% in October 2009 during the recession. But at the beginning of this year, it was down to 4.1% on the heels of tax reform, declining back down to 3.8 last month. Being called historic because the number also represents an almost 50-year low from the 3.8% unemployment rate of 1969.
I think it's pure energy and drive.
Employment expert Stephen Viscusi says this encouraging jobs report indicates policies are working.
I do think the tax incentives are going to have a better opportunity to help jobs than people think or give it credit for.
Viscusi says the best job opportunities here in the tri-state include positions in trucking, hospitality, and with the airline.
So let's back up here. That report was filed in June, saying that the May jobs report exceeded expectations, that unemployment was back down to a record 3.8%, and that there were more job openings than there were unemployed workers. And we haven't seen that. That's the part that's really stunning, because you could not have imagined anything like that during the Obama administration. Diane King Hall, who you heard in that report, reiterated again in a report that was filed by CBS in Los Angeles that same day.
The U.S. labor market has hit a tipping point that might help boost wages. For the first time since the government began tracking job openings in 2000, there are more open jobs in the U.S. than unemployed workers to fill them. Revised government data shows that job openings outpaced unemployed workers for the first time in March, and the trend continued in April.
And if you remember what came out of CBS Detroit, they're saying, wages are going up too. So every criticism you can have against the improving job situation under Trump is false. There is real job growth. The growth has become so much that we don't have enough people to fill those opportunities. Wages are going up, so you can't say that, well, you're just filling up these real cheap jobs. Part-time job was the growth under Barack Obama. That's not what we're seeing under Donald Trump. It just isn't. And the real difference is the idea that one president wanted to control your access to labor and the other says, why don't you go do what you want to do? I'm going to turn you loose. I'm going to remove some of the shackles on the economy of the federal government, and let's see how the people respond. And this is what they've done. What does this mean? Now, one of the things you can say, which is really not a criticism, well, this is overall, but, the real opportunities, aren't where people happen to live. Let me help you out with that. When we had the gold rush, did we move the gold over to where the people were, or did the people go to where the gold was? Opportunity doesn't come looking for you. It presents itself and expects you to exploit it if you're going to take part. For people who want jobs in this country, there is no excuse. There are jobs. Now, the question is, if it's not where you are, maybe it's time for you to move. Go west, go east, go north, go south, but go somewhere and get thyself a job, if that's what you want to have. You can't ask, unless you're going to try to get employers and the president, everybody else to know what, we need you to deliver these jobs to these people because they're in poverty here and they don't want to move. Really? Come on, guys. More jobs than there are unemployed workers. It's time for you to make something happen because you're now without excuse. These are real opportunities at a time when we came off an 8-year period with an economy that was limping, and that's putting it mildly. On a related note, Paul Ryan, the outgoing speaker, thank goodness he's outgoing, had a very brief moment of what I would call quasi-Americanism as he was speaking about welfare.
We have 12.5 million Americans, able-bodied, who do not have small kids at home, who are working age, who are not working, not looking for a job, not in school. They're slipping through the cracks in society. We have tight labor markets. We have careers and jobs being offered. We have more jobs being offered in America today than people seeking jobs. So is it not absolutely the right thing to do to get people off the sidelines into the labor force? And when we've had these pilot projects, whether they're Kansas or Maine, we have shown a mild work requirement that says you got to put 20 hours a week in, 20 hours a week in work or in school, and we'll cover the cost of your job training. That is as reasonable and common sense as it gets, and more importantly, it's good for people.
So let's be clear. 12 million people who are unencumbered, able-bodied, there's no reason why they can't work. And now you have a situation where there is more work available for these people than there are unemployed individuals in the country. In other words, they don't have small children. They're not sick, they don't have small children, they may or may not be married. You want to talk about somebody who's able to pick up and go to where the opportunities are. If the opportunities are out there and you are able-bodied and able to actually exploit those opportunities, please explain to me why I should give you anybody else's money when you can go make your own. The idea that we should be giving welfare to anyone who is able to work. I'm not talking about the people who can't work, but anyone who can work at a time when there are more jobs than there are people seeking employment. Nobody falling into the able-bodied category should get a government check unless you actually work for the government. I think the speaker is being too easy, too compassionate. That's why I call it half American, because you're not offering these same benefits and this same compassion to people who have to fund this money that you want to give away. Where's their love? They're always asked to give. What do they get from the government besides, a mean sideways glance from the IRS? They don't get anything. He also talked about pilot programs in Kansas and Maine where they actually move people off of welfare using a work requirement or a training requirement. Let's take a look at what happened in Maine. This is from the Daily Signal, a report that was published in May of 2016.
Republicans in Washington have long been calling for changes to the welfare system, but Maine's governor decided to take action in his state. How did this Republican governor and his administration change his state's welfare programs? And what happened to the people who receive food stamp benefits? In 2014, Maine Governor Paul LePage and Mary Mayhew, Commissioner of the state's Department of Health and Human Services, announced they were going to reinstate work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents. A work requirement for childless adults was included in the 1996 welfare reform signed by President Clinton, but during the recession, the federal government extended waivers to states as unemployment climbed. Maine was one of those states, but in July 2014, Governor LePage decided to reinstate the work requirement for 15,000 of these recipients. 12,000 of those childless adults weren't working, and they received $15 million in benefits per year.
As we've looked at these programs, they've really trapped people in poverty. So front and center to the governor's reforms has been promoting employment, that a job is not a dirty word. A job is what contributes to self-esteem, to self-worth, to human dignity. And that to really change someone's life, we need to get them on that pathway to prosperity and out of poverty through a job.
Under Maine's welfare reform, Mayhew reinstated a 5-year time limit on those participating in the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF program. The state also required able-bodied adults without dependents to either work 20 hours per week, volunteer 1 hour a day, or be in a vocational training program to receive food stamp benefits.
And I think it's important for everyone to keep in mind, if you are on these programs, it means you are living in poverty. And we should absolutely refuse to accept that that is the way of life that should be accepted for these individuals, that we actually believe in their potential.
After implementing work requirements, the number of childless adults on food stamps decreased significantly. Mayhew's department saw its caseload drop from 13,322 in December 2014 to 2,768 in March 2015, an 80% decline, and incomes increased 114%.
That's the story. That when you're on welfare, you're discouraged from working. You're only thinking about, if I work, if I earn a little more money, I'm going to lose my benefit. But when these programs begin to promote employment, you contribute to that pathway and that economic mobility.
Mayhew and LePage faced criticism for pursuing welfare reform from advocates for the poor who argue work requirements are especially harsh in areas with high unemployment. But Mayhew said that the benefits for Maine residents have been noticeable.
These individuals not only increase their earnings, they increase their earnings to move above the federal poverty line. That's the success of these reforms.
Let me see if I got this straight. After the recession, they looked around in Maine and said, you know what, this is getting a little bit out of hand. We have too many people on welfare. We're going to put a work requirement back in place, which was there in the 1996 Welfare Reform Act, which was very successful in moving people off of welfare, for those who do not recall. And as a result of doing that, they saw in about a year, 12 to 18 months' time, an 80% drop in the number of people receiving certain types of welfare and a 114% increase in incomes. But the people who were advocating for the poor had some type of problem with this. Do you want to know why? It's called the Cloward-Piven strategy. That's a political strategy that was outlined in 1966. And what it called for was overloading U.S. public welfare system in order to precipitate a crisis that would lead to a replacement of the welfare system with something that is even worse. And that's what we're not seeing. A national guaranteed annual income. The idea here's what the people who advocate for the poor want. They want a guaranteed annual income, which is not what America is about, never has been. And it's a progressive idea, it's a globalist idea, and it is the end of individual liberty. And you see that if you simply ask people to work, do not give them money if they will not work, they make more money than you would give them. And they join those who actually participate in individual liberty. This is really simple. When you let capitalism run amok, and we're not even close to doing that, but we have a situation by freeing up capitalism to a point, we have more job opportunities than we have people to take advantage of those opportunities. And when we're requiring people who were on welfare and not participating, when we require them to go to work if they're going to get anything at all, they find out that I can make more money getting off welfare than I can by staying poor and being on it. This is making America great again. Did the same thing in Kansas as well. Move people off of welfare back into the workforce. And it was successful. It's successful everywhere it's tried. And not just in this country, by the way. What Donald Trump is doing is working for this country. Period. And in ways that everybody can feel. More people are working. Lower unemployment than we saw under Reagan, who was reelected with a campaign slogan, America, morning America, America's going back to work again. So what do you think is going to happen in 2020? Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, we'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. ESPN.com filed a story back on the 10th of July. It says the NFL Players Association files challenge to league's national anthem policy. They filed a non-injury grievance challenging the legitimacy of the NFL's new national anthem policy on several grounds. Now, the new policy that they've had is said, you know what? If you're on the field when they play the anthem, then you need to respect the flag, you need to respect the anthem, you need to stand. You don't have to be on the field. You can be in the locker room and you can do whatever you want. Period. Oh, and by the way, if you violate that policy, we're not going to fine you as players, we're going to fine the teams. The team will get fined if you violate the policy. So, to be honest, the NFL, if you understand what this is really about, they're bending over backwards to try to accommodate the social justice warrior nonsense. but it's still nonsense. Let me give you an idea of what this is really about on the quote-unquote player side, or at least those who believe they speak for the players. This is a clip from an ESPN program back on the 25th of May, not long after the policy was announced. You're going to hear from D. Smith primarily, and also Jalen Rose. Listen to what you hear, and then I want to tell you what this is really all about on the other side of this clip.
There's so much. I think the thing that stood out a lot was the fact that nobody was consulted on the player side of things. That after, and this is what I said 2 days ago, they don't care. They don't care. So let's just stop pretending they do. I think that would make everyone a little more comfortable. They did all of this in the dark of night without once talking to the Players Association, talking to the players after months of pretending like they were doing all that, the facade of we are listening to you, let's open up the dialogue, and then they do this anyways. I also think it's interesting that we've decided to take the owner's definition of the word freedom rather than the actual definition of the word freedom. You want to take out the NFL players? Fine, let's do that. Let's say flight attendants were forced to do the anthem before you took off every time, and they decided, you know what, for various reasons, for many reasons, I don't want to. Would we have such a big deal? But a lot of people want to bring millionaires into the argument, which is completely irrelevant as far as it goes. There are parts in the world where they are forced to stand for that country's anthems, and we pride ourselves on not being like those countries, and yet here we are forcing this fake moment of patriotism because of what they have decided is a scarier version of reality, a tweet from Washington, D.C., or wherever it may come from, versus alienating the other half of the fan base, people like me who are angry about this. I live in America. I have freedoms. You don't get to decide what that means. It means what it means, period. And if I don't like something my country has done, I still love my country, but I have a right to show that in some way that I deem fit.
And it's just amazing, a year and a half or 2 years, it's just baffling to me that the NFL and the owners are still grappling on what to actually do with this situation, yet they're not communicating with their players, or ultimately the people who are demonstrating during the national anthem. Also, when you say that certain players can stay in the locker room and certain players can take the field, all you're doing is dividing the locker room. This is a divide and conquer tactic. You just alluded to it. You're pandering to one side, but you're alienating the other side. And what has happened here is people just think that on one side, the dollar has power. Well, the dollar has power on both sides. And this protest is what led to now Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed, who initiated this, are both looking for jobs. There's no coincidence there. So it just, I can't understand how bad the NFL continues to handle this. Memorial Day weekend, we're talking about this. We didn't ask to talk about this. Wasn't on our rundown 2 days ago.
No.
The NFL decided, for some strange reason, this is the week, the same day that a video gets released in Milwaukee of a basketball player.
Yep.
Going through a situation with the police department, which is why this is happening. People aren't necessarily demonstrating against the flag. And that has gotten hijacked by all of the rhetoric that surrounded this topic.
Yeah, to be clear, this week was the owners' meeting, so perhaps that's why the timing of it, but they certainly didn't have to announce it this week if they didn't choose to. I just want to reiterate that we have reached out to 7 different, or at least have had 7 different owners of NFL teams decline invitations to appear on the show. Those invitations absolutely stand, and having heard what D. Smith said, if any of the owners of a National Football League team or any executives at the NFL offices would like to come on and respond, obviously they are 100% welcome here.
I'm going to go ahead and say it, and whoever has a response can say, I don't give a rat's behind what a woman thinks of football. Shut up. If you want to go talk about women's softball, you want to go talk about the WNBA, you want to talk about that, that's fine. I do not need or care for a woman's opinion about the sport of American football and what's going on in it. Part of the reason we're having this discussion now is there's too much flippant estrogen in football as it is. People like D. Smith and those who think like her are why the NFL is afraid to play football. Why we have all these interesting rule changes. Well, we're trying to protect the players. You're not going to be protected playing American football. If you want to be protected from injury, don't play this game. But you want to turn it into some flag football on steroids. And then you wonder why people aren't as crazy about it anymore. Because they're not. I want to go through three things or maybe more that came up in that clip. Two of them came from D. Smith, the woman. The fact that, they're millionaires, people bring that up and that's not relevant. Really? The fact that you get paid all this money to play a game and all they're asking you to do is, as part of the ritual of playing the game, be respectful of the flag and the anthem. And somehow that is some great imposition upon you? Bogus. Another thing she said was, she called it a fake moment of patriotism. This isn't about patriotism. This is simply about respect. You can hate the flag. You can hate the country. You can hate the anthem. But all you have to do is stand there silently while it's being played. There's a video that went viral for a while. It was of Usain Bolt from Jamaica, who had just won a race and was giving an interview, and for another track and field event, an American had won and the anthem was being played, and he stopped his interview to show respect. He wasn't being patriotic toward America. He's not American. He was simply being respectful of the country, of the athlete that had prevailed. He can do that being Jamaican, and I have all these overpaid, estrogenated, mostly melanated, so-called men who have a problem with it. It's just crazy. It's crazy. And I open this up by talking about the NFL challenging the league's national anthem policy to show you, now you already heard it, just how far left sports media is. Listen to this report on the challenge from NBC Sports that was filed on July 10th.
The headline is something that we have expected for several weeks now. The NFL Players Association reacting to the recent change to the anthem policy, filing a grievance under the collective bargaining agreement, challenging the NFL's decision to unilaterally take away a right that the players previously had. It's a simple assessment. The players had the right to protest during the national anthem. The NFL took that right away without bargaining with the union. It's a violation of the labor deal. The deeper message, though, is something that maybe we hadn't expected, a commitment by the league and the union to get together and to try to work this out. And frankly, that's something that should have been done when the problem first arose in August of 2016, when Colin Kaepernick, the former 49ers quarterback, was spotted sitting during the anthem. The NFL's position then, he's encouraged to stand, but he's not required. And if they wanted a requirement that he stand along with all other players, they should have sat down then and there with the union before it blew up into the thing it now is. And as a practical matter, it's going to be a lot more costly by way of the concessions the NFL will have to make to get to the point where the players do agree to whatever it is the NFL wants. Let's say the NFL wants them all to agree to stand on the sideline. It's going to cost a lot more than it would have cost back in August of 2016 because the issue is so much bigger now. But that's what the NFL should have done back 2 years ago. Now the challenge will be finding a way to work this out once and for all that removes the distraction for everyone but still preserves the ability of the players to make themselves heard and make their views known unless a major concession is made by the NFL to get them to give up that right.
This isn't a labor dispute. There are no unfair working conditions for the NFL. Neither are there any guaranteed contracts. You can end this whole thing, the NFL owners can, by simply waiving or cutting or releasing players who are going to be problematic about this issue. They've done it for other things. And trust me, there are enough issues in the NFL among their players so that you can have a legitimate reason to let people go that has nothing to do with the national anthem. There are a lot of folks with criminal records in the NFL. Some of them are major players. That would get the message across. If you just said, you know what, if you got a criminal record, we're not signing anybody in the NFL who has a criminal record. Okay. Are you going to say that you have a right to play in the NFL if you have a criminal record? I want to see how that one goes over. Would that decimate the NFL? I wouldn't say decimate. It would definitely make a dent. It would definitely get the attention of people. And that's kind of what you need to have right now. But the whole emphasis there is the players. The players have a shelf life of 3 years. They're only going to be in the league for 3 years on average. Tom Brady is an exception. Aaron Rodgers is an exception. The average NFL career is about 3 flipping years. You think these players are important? They can't be important because they don't last that long. They don't. But you want to make it about the players. Why? They're getting paid. Well, we want to protest. You know what? You're not in the facility all the time. The idea is this. You do not get to protest in uniform. Just put it out there that way. You will not protest in uniform. And you're required to be in uniform on game day. So when you're in uniform, you do not protest. You can do whatever you want on the practice field. That's for your team to worry about, this, that, and the other. But on game day, when you put on the uniform, there's no protest. The American people would understand that. They already do understand that. But now let's really talk about what this is about, really. This is about money. Watch It News filed a report back in December of 2017 that described a situation that cannot be sustained and will not be sustained.
NFL ad revenue increased 2% year over year across all networks from September to November of this season, despite declining viewership according to Adweek. Average game viewership fell to 15 million in early December, down from 16.5 million in the same month last year. The trend is a continuation from earlier in the NFL season, when revenue increased 2% year over year in September, despite ratings falling 5% according to Adweek. NFL ad revenue continues to increase amid ratings declines because it's still one of the biggest ratings drivers on TV. More broadly speaking, live sports are one of the last bastions of TV viewership. Cord cutting has hit record numbers in 2017, but live sports remain a key reason consumers tune into pay TV. 82% of traditional pay TV subscribers would trim their subscription if they no longer needed it to view live sporting events, according to PwC.
If you're a progressive, all you heard is, see, they're still making money. The ad revenues are going up. But viewership is going down. At the end of the day, those two trends are going to have to get in sync. Either viewership is going to have to go back up, or advertisers are going to pay attention to the fact that they're paying more and more money for fewer and fewer eyeballs, and their spends are going to get cut. You know the other thing that's going on? Merchandising. Those revenues are going down. The Ravens reported 8 months ago that their sales are down this season. The Bengals said the same thing. Not the Browns. The Browns shouldn't be selling a doggone thing. Now, you also remember that there are polls out there that show that the NFL is now not a popular sport, or at least not anywhere near as popular as it once was. Oh, by the way, NFL ticket sales, season ticket sales. The Baltimore Ravens admit that the protests tanked their ticket sales. That was in December of last year. NFL's sales drop was more than a protest problem, according to the ticketnews.com. NFL attendance has not been hurt by protests, but there's a catch. Because the sales are dropping. Colts blame reduced season ticket sales renewals on poor play and anthem policy, or the anthem protests. Guys, let me help you out. The owners made a very simple move. We are starting to see revenues slip. And it's because I got a bunch of folks up here acting a fool and showing disrespect to the flag. we don't need you to be patriots. We just need you to be respectful. Let me give you an idea what happened. If you walked out 15 transsexuals before every game and said, let's show respect for them, you wouldn't have any of the players having a problem with that. Even though some of them would arguably be pretty much diametrically opposed to transsexualism. But they would still be respectful. How come you can't be respectful toward the flag? It hasn't done a thing to you. Well, it's about the police. Well, the flag doesn't represent the police. The NFL is trying to stop the bleeding. They don't want to be making less money. The idea is for the sport to continue to grow and grow. That's their motivation. The motivation of the players is a mystery to everybody who's listening to it. We want people to be aware of these problems. Nobody's looking to football to make them aware of the problems of the nation. Black people are really getting disrespected in this country. 74% of the folks in the NFL making 6 and 7 figures to the left side of the decimal point every year are black. But they still don't respect us. Well, then give them back their money. This is foolishness. And I have two groups here who sound like they're singing the same Mariah Carey song. They can't let go. The owners don't want to let go of the money, but they want to try to make it with these players. The players don't want to let go of a protest that has not captured the attention of the nation, or at least the favor of the nation. And both of them are locked in this death spiral. And the only thing that is happening is fans, their eyeballs, and their money are walking out the door. Until the players' union is broken on this issue, I'm not trying to say you should dissolve the union. Until they're broken on this issue, I hope the NFL continues to decline in revenues. Until the owners get a backbone and say, you know what? We're going to be okay whether there's a football league or not, but you guys, what are you going to do? Then we'll see some movement. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', we'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force of internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida, Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. I watched the Wimbledon female finals because I just wanted to see what was going on with Serena Williams. I normally don't pay attention to women's tennis. I'm just being honest. I don't have anything against it. I just, to be honest with you, I really don't pay that much attention to women's sports, period. But this was an interesting story. It's a compelling story. She recently had a baby. She's recently married. And particularly after the physical changes that a woman can experience after having a child, for her to return to compete at the highest levels in her sport is definitely remarkable. And I just wanted to see what was going to happen. And she was destroyed. Serena Williams was thoroughly dismantled in the Wimbledon final, to the point that it was not a competitive match. And I just watched. I didn't have a dog in the fight. If she had won, I would have said, okay, wow, she made it back. She didn't win. But what got me was that it was really not competitive. Her movements were slow and plodding. The uncharacteristic misses of shots. She was thoroughly outplayed. She was thoroughly outclassed, which is not something I'm used to seeing whenever, or hearing about whenever I've been observant of Serena Williams. I saw flashes So let me put it this way. I don't know if she was tired. Maybe she's getting old. She's actually, in her late 30s as a tennis player, and she's been around for more than 2 decades now. And Father Time in competitive sports is undefeated. You can't keep, these are by definition young people's games, and you're not going to be able to keep it up forever, no matter how exceptional you may be. But something else came up while I was watching her, because the way she was moving and the way she was unfocused and missing shots in an uncharacteristic manner, the thought just came to my mind, this is not where she's really wanting to be. She's not here, at least not all here, in the way that you need to be to get to and stay at the top of your profession, if your profession is professional sports. Maybe being a wife and mother, as she's getting toward the end of her tennis career anyway, is something that she looks forward to more than practicing and preparing for tournaments. Maybe. And if that's the case, not for a lack of ability, but for a lack of passion, Serena may be done. Because once the pilot light goes out, it's not enough to just be talented. I have to really get that across to people. It's not enough to be a unique physical specimen, which she is in the women's game. It's not enough to be talented, which she is in the women's game. You have to want it more. And if that pilot light has been snuffed out for tennis supremacy and tennis dominance by her desire to be a wife and mother, I don't know that that thing ever gets lit again. I've seen that when Pete Sampras, for example, when he fell off the number 1 ranking, he was gone. Other players, once they lose the fire, and that's what really happens, once you lose that fire, it doesn't matter how good you are anymore. Somebody will always want it more than you if your pilot light goes out. So the U.S. Open is coming up, and we'll get a chance to evaluate again whether or not Serena is all in. I did not necessarily see, as I said, a deterioration of her skills and talents. What I saw was a lack of focus and maybe a lack of energy, which could be preparation or just could be still recovering from having a child. But if she can't break through at the U.S. Open, then we'll have another data point that might suggest she's done. Now, if she's done, this is not necessarily a point of, it's not a funeral dirge we're talking about here. She's been an outstanding player for more than 20 years. She's been a dominant player for most of that time. She has 23 wins in major tennis tournaments, including 7 at Wimbledon. She's pocketed more than $82 million in winnings from playing tennis. There's no way you can say this is a bad career. But here's the question. Black people dote on Serena Williams because she's black. Not because she's good, but because she's black. She's black and good. And black females in particular put a lot of stock in Serena Williams. When she's no longer a tennis player, is the fact that she married a white man and had a white man's kid going to impact how people think about her? Because, to be honest, if black people are going to be consistent, then it should. Serena Williams is quoted as saying, the reason she's married to this white guy, which she never thought she was going to be married to a white guy. She said that in the griot back in May of this year. Said I never thought that would happen. But she made it very clear in April of 2017, speaking on WHUR.com, that the white guy had treated her better than any black man. I have black men, particularly on social media and elsewhere, who will sing the praises of Serena Williams all day long. You have Jamie Foxx, who had his little Serena fetish, and I'm sure it was genuine admiration, but he would sing to her on shows and everything else. He let it be known that he had a thing of a type for Serena Williams. And then he ends up with Tom Cruise's ex-wife. Why not? Why not him? Where are all the black guys who have so much admiration for a black Serena Williams, but they don't know how to treat her? Well, she's from Compton. She's from Compton, California. This is not a woman who has a snooty, snobbish upbringing. That's not her. Now, she's been treated a particular way since she became a tennis star and started making all that money. I understand that. But her roots are not someone who is looking down. Her father was not an absentee father. Her father was her coach and helped make her into what she is. So she has an innate respect for black men and the nurturing and support that they can give to black women. She experienced that from her father, but none of the black guys who wanted to date her cared enough about her as a person to treat her better than a white man. And now she has married white privilege. She has married the symbol of white privilege, a white male, and she is having his children. For all the left-leaning, blacker-than-thou Negroes out there, that's a slap in the face. And that's not a slap in the face because Serena is trying to insult you. It's a slap in the face because she's letting you know the state of your game. You're not in the same league as a nice white guy. That's what you're being told. A nice white guy is better than any black man that has approached Serena. Well, it's just she didn't get approached by the right one. Really? And who would that be? Let me know who that would be. Because you all had opportunities to get to her and her sister. And everybody was always really complimentary of her physical form and her features and how just outstanding she was. Why didn't you treat her well enough to keep her black as opposed to having her marry a white man? And are you going to try to keep her an icon when that statement is going to be out there now forever? As long as she's married to this guy, it's always going to be out there that she didn't think she was going to go white, but he treated her so much better than a black man did. Any black man that wanted to date her. So Serena now becomes a prize of white privilege. Are you still going to sing her praises? Or are you even going to do any self-reflection? Because this is the same thing that black women complain about a black guy makes his money, gets his name, and all of a sudden some white girl snatches him up and he turns his back on the sisters. And I can guarantee you they have some of the same testimony. The sisters treat me, they got some interesting expectations and they treat you a certain way. And I went to the white chick and she didn't do me like that, which is exactly what Serena Williams is saying. When are black folks going to get a hold of themselves? And if black is what you're really about, when are you going to start treating each other like you really care? Serena got dismantled. But that's not all that necessarily went down. A black icon went down, and she's going down and becoming linked with white privilege. And the reason that is, black men didn't treat her well. And knowing black women the way I do, and I've heard black women talk about her, and they don't always say the most complimentary thing. We don't treat each other well, as evidenced by the fact of the murder rate, and the robbery, and the rapes, and everything else that in the black community, mostly perpetrated by black people. You're never going to get to the point where you have an icon that matters if you can't treat them well. Other thing, why do you always need an icon who plays football? Why don't you grab somebody for their intellect and their achievements that don't involve sports and see if there's a little bit more to them than meets the eye? And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you is my prayer. And until next week, take care of everyone, including yourself, all your loved ones. And we hope to see you next week.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.